I'm recording. Here we go. All right. So I graded, I got up to the tests and graded like the first, I don't know, 4 or 5. So they're coming. And so far they've been all over the place. Very good and very bad. Okay. So those are coming. So like the next time I start grading, it's those tests. Okay. I posted a new homework. Now we've entered the sort of database portion of the course. And so this is just an ER modeling exercise. So I have a little description here of that there are users and groups and then applications, and you are to write out the relationships in both directions. I asked for this. This is a homework, and you know I grade homeworks pretty leniently. If you try something, I say, fine, here's 100. Unless it's late, then I say, here's a 90. But this way of describing a relationship is going to be in the project. And if you get it wrong in the project, then you're going to, I'll throw 5 points at this or something on the project. And I'm not as nice on the project as I am on the homework. So figure out, if you don't know what I want, figure out what I want through this homework by turning it in on time and getting my reaction to it, so that you get all those points on the project. So some of the homework, especially some of the homework is programming, and some of the homework has just been, just popped in. I don't know. Some of the homeworks that I posted have been like a little quiz or some database vocabulary or summarize some video. And there's no reason those shouldn't be coming in and you getting the points for those. So go back and pick those up. All the database ones are still worth 100. Anything from test 1 or test 2 is worth up to 90. Okay. So there's still a lot of points to be had. Go get them. And in terms of labs, we have been in SQLAlchemy, been making the database, and now we are ready to start today to make the interface to the database. So that's what we'll be starting today. And I've also posted the project, so that will be due. Well, let me do that. Let's figure out when our final is. So the exam, so we meet on what, Tuesday, Thursdays at 2. Tuesday, Thursday at 2. So we're on Thursday, May 12th at noon, at 12. So that's when our third test, it's in the finals week. It'll be basically a third test. It will be the SQLAlchemy and Flask and WT forms. So I will probably, like I did on this last test, break it up into 2 parts. One part will be purely about making the database. So one part of it will be sort of pure SQLAlchemy. And then I will have a different problem where I will probably give you the SQLAlchemy, maybe even a route or 2, and then ask you to add routes and forms. So that's what's going to be on the test. 2 parts. We'll have a little bit longer. So instead of 75 minutes, it'll be probably an hour and 45 minutes. So it'll be a longer amount of time. Okay. Anything else? So that's when the final exam is, and the project I'm making due, what did I say? May 6th. So is that the Friday before finals week? So I posted the criterion for the project. We haven't learned everything yet, but we've learned some of it, and it's database oriented, because that's what this is course is supposed to be. I had to spend a third of the course sort of teaching some Python. You're going to have a database. It should have at least 4 entities. Each entity / table should have a few properties, or in SQLAlchemy language, columns. There should be a few records. There should be explicit primary keys, except maybe in a bridge table. I'll allow them, all the other tables that aren't a sort of a bridge table better have primary keys. You want to demonstrate that you know how to do a one-to-many relationship by having one in your database. You want to demonstrate that you know how to do a many-to-many relationship by having one in your database. So you must have one of each. You're going to write a little report, nothing very formal, Word document, PDF, however you like it. And one thing you have to do is that in that homework I just pointed out, write out your relationships in these 2 directions. So each relationship requires 2 sentences. And I'm not normally fussy if something works, but it's not my way, it's okay. This is the one thing that's not okay. I want it done my way. Too many people get this wrong and don't understand relationships. This is supposed to help you straighten it out or make me see if you've got it straightened out. So I need you to do it this way. I want some kind of ER diagram for your database. I don't need anything fancy. You can use a product. You can, if you have some product you've used before to make your database and you want to do something formal and nice looking, that is fine. If you just want to hand draw it, that's fine. I don't use any particular notation. Basically the tables or entity should be represented by some kind of rectangle with the fields mentioned and maybe some indication of the primary key and some lines between boxes to represent the relationships. And you don't have to do anything like crow's feet or anything fancy in the ER diagram, because I also have your sentences to tell me about the sort of the number part of it. It can be drawn on a piece of paper and like scanned in and put into your Word document or your PDF. So it doesn't have to be anything, you have to have it. It doesn't have to be any particular format, as opposed to these sentences, which you have to give me what I want. So easy on this, I'm easy on this, I'm hard on that. Then you have to actually, so that's the database, then you have to make the database. So you're going to define the database, you're going to populate the database. I'm going to show you today sort of how to divvy up the Python files so that one file is defining the database, one is populating the database, then we'll have our routes. So the project I'm going to go over today is going to be largely the format you're going to use for your project. You should populate some tables. I want you to use both types, both of the main types of data files to, again, demonstrate that you know how to use them. So show me that you know how to work a CSV, show me that you know how to work a JSON file. Then you're going to have some routes, some web pages that interact with your database. You're going to have a way to insert information into sort of a table that has no foreign keys. So simple, just insert. Then insert into a table that does have some foreign keys. And then you have to, in your interface, control the foreign keys, probably by some kind of dropdown. We haven't done that yet, and you won't see that. Maybe you'll see that later in the week or next week. And then there should be some kind of validation. So some kind of data you're putting in, say it's got to have a certain length, or it's got to be of an email, or it's, so there should be some validation just to show me that you know how to validate within Flask. You should have some queries that you're going to display on a web page. So just here's some information, spit it out on a page. One that involves one table, and one that involves two tables. I'm going to show you how to put something in sort of an HTML table to make it look nicer. And then I'm going to show you eventually how to put things into a database table so that the results will have a nice functionality to be searchable and sortable. So those are the things I want. And if you treat this as a checklist and you sort of don't wait until you know, the afternoon of May 6th to do this, it's easy for you to get in the 90s on the project. I'm not as easy as homework, so hundreds are rare, but it's easy to get into the low to mid 90s on this project just by paying attention that you have all the parts. And if you're not sure if you have the part and you're working enough ahead of time, then you will just ask me. And I'll probably give that last week of just time to work on the project. I usually give that last week of just, if I have a course with a project, I usually, the last week is just work on your project. And the labs you don't have done. Okay. So if you start the project now and you're caught up on your labs, then you have the last week off of this course. Any questions? All right. So again, do your homework, do your project. Projects like 10 points. You don't do the project, that's a full, probably more than a letter grade. Full letter grade, you've gone down. Similarly for like the homeworks, I forget what the homeworks were. Let's have a peek at the syllabus since I just said it. The homework is 15%. So that's like a letter grade and a half or more. So if you decide, I'm not going to do a project, I'm not going to do any homework, you better be very bright and have 100 on everything else to be able to get like a C. Okay. These things are not that hard. A little bit of work, do them, ask questions, get them right, get an A, or get at least do as well as you can. All right. So that was all blah, blah, blah about the course in general. Now let's show our new application right now. Today we are marrying the Flask and the SQLAlchemy. So we're going to have a form made by Flask and WT Forms, and we're going to have a database, and we're going to affect what's in the database based on what the user puts in the form. Okay. So I downloaded that. I'm extracting that. And as I was always saying in Flask for, I don't know, 4 weeks running, 3 weeks running, you give me what I give you. So static and templates and the Python files you give me. I don't need your configuration. I don't want your configuration file. Don't send it to me. I don't need your scripts. Don't send it to me. Send me templates, send me static, send me Python. Okay, when we set up the SQLAlchemy, I think I was working in SQL 2, VENV, and when I set that up, I installed, what did I install? I installed the virtual environment first, then I installed Flask, then I installed Flask WTF. So I should be able to work with Flask. I should be able to work with WTF. I should be ready to go. Code. I'm opening the folder. I always open to the folder. 341. I'm working in SQL 2. I'm working in that virtual environment. And I'm back to my art example. I had my artist paint, my painters painting paintings. That's the database I'm working with today. And I'm going to delete the database and just sort of make it again. And I have, so these are the ones I'm playing with. App art define, app art populate, app art routes. App art, I think, is the old one. That's the old one where everything was combined. So I'm not working with that one. Pretty sure that, yeah, I'm separate that defined and populated all in one file, and I don't want to do that. So that's old stuff, so I'm taking it out. And I have forms up. So those are the ones I'm playing. The no Beatles. Let me delete these other things. I don't need to, but I'm going to just to simplify what I'm looking at. So there is the 4 files I want to play with, along with of course, there are templates and maybe some style. Okay. And my painting, I don't need Kepler or Beatles songs. So let me delete that as well. Okay. I didn't have to delete them. They were perfectly fine there. I'm just trying to make it easier for you to see what's what. I'm going to close these things and open them back up. So I have the define file. I'm going to say I'm going to have a painter entity. I'm going to have a painting entity. They're going to have a relationship. And that's it. And so I'm going to say this is just going to be the definition of the database, setting up the schema, if you will, but not really put anything in that database. Okay. So we know what this looks like. I say, where's the database going to be? It's going to be an ArtDB. I'm going to have a painter class. So this is just review, but I'm just organizing my files better. Before I just shoved everything into one file. And now I need to do different things at different times. And so I'm like better organizing myself. Here's this file now just defines the database. So here's my painter class, which corresponds to a painter's table. I have an ID, which is a primary key. There's a last name, a first name, a country, birth date, a death date. And there's a relationship to the painting class. In the painting class, which extends the sort of base of SQLAlchemy, this class corresponds to a table in my database paintings. It has an ID, it has a title, it has a file name, and it has a field called the painter ID, which is the foreign key. So the relationship, this is actually in the database. So we say that a painter paints many paintings. a painting is painted by one painter. So if you break down that relationship the way I want, then the entity with the one in the sentence, the painting was painted by one painter, that's where the foreign key goes. And that's actually a column, meaning it's actually in the database. Whereas the other side of the relationship is just in code. So in painter, we say there's a relationship to painting, but it's not explicit in the database. Whereas the painting, the relationship to painter is an actual field, an actual column in the database, and it's designated as the foreign key. One more time, when you say a painter paints many paintings, a painting is painted by one painter, it's the one that tells you, oh, that's the foreign key. All right, that's all I do here in the define Python file is define the database. Then all the other files that are working on this database are going to import this file. So this doesn't do, this is basically classes. It's not going to do anything on its own. It's going to be brought in by the other things and used. Okay. Here is populate. In populate, I'm going to read a data file and put things into the into my tables. And I might sometimes have some like hard-coded things. Sometimes I've in the past examples, I've sometimes hard-coded records, and sometimes I've read data files. So there are times when I'm going to say, here's the data file, use it. And for your project, you have to show me how to use two different kinds of data files, but you might still hard code some records. That's acceptable. You have to do some populating by data files, but you don't have to do all the populating by data files. Okay. So here we have, I'm bringing in app art define, and I'm calling it my_db. So I'm bringing in the definition. I have we just went over the definition. I'm bringing in the definition, and whenever I'm going to use the definition, I'm going to refer to it as my_db. I'm going to actually do stuff with the database, so I need a session maker. That session means it's not the session we talked about in Flask, which was a pure web session. This is I'm connecting to the database session. So in Flask, when we talked about session, it was the user brought up a browser and has not closed the browser. That was a session in Flask. Now we're talking about a database, a SQLAlchemy session, and that means I'm connecting to the database. Okay, I want to do something to the database, so I have to connect to it, so I have to establish a session. I bring in my normal JSON stuff because I'm going to read a JSON file. This is where the JSON file is located relative to all these files. I had somebody who had a path that was like C:users, their username, blah, blah, blah. That does me no good. I copy your files into my section where I run SQLAlchemy, and that path's no good to me. I don't have, your user on my computer. So it should always be this more relative address. Where are we relative to this? So here I use the operating system to say this particular path, this population path, let me imagine that I'm in that location. That's what this did. And then from there, where is the JSON file? It's in static, it's in data, it's called painting_data.json. Okay. Your programs have to be portable. You send them to me, I zip them, I throw them into my program. That's all I should have to do. Invoke them and then run them. I shouldn't have to go changing any paths. Okay, read the file, load it up. You've seen this before. I'm looping through the artists in the file, and then I'm looping through the paintings in each artist, and I'm making a painter object. And here's my whole painter from here to here. That parenthesis of opening painter is matched by down here. So I'm assigning all the fields right away. I'm not assigning the ID because it's an integer and it's going to auto increment. I add it and I flush it. Flush is not quite commit, but flush makes the ID available so that when I make a painting for that painter, I have access to the painter's ID, which I can use as the foreign key for the painting. Okay, so then in a nested loop, I'm looping over the paintings. I'm making the painting, and I'm just using here the title and the file name. And then after that, so that's me sort of using my class, the constructor of my class. Then I did this foreign key separately. I don't think I have to do that. It's just what I tend to do. And then this time, again, I added the paintings. And then when I'm done all of it, I commit. If you don't commit, it's not in the database. And then I do some queries. Again, this is just what we did before with this stuff, so it's a repeat. But the one new thing is I've separated the population code from the definition code. So I made a query of the painter table. I filtered it on the second painter, who I think was Georges Seurat, and I'm looping through the paintings of Georges Seurat. I'm going to the painter table, and I'm filtering on the country being France. So I'm picking up all my French artists and leaving my other artists in the behind. And I have another painter where I'm getting all of the painters, and then I'm using this length. And so I'm getting the paintings of the artist and doing length and figuring out how many painters, how many paintings for each painter. So right now, again, I killed the database. If I want the database back, I run the Python program. This is not yet Flask. So I usually run Flask from the command line. This is not Flask. This is just regular old SQLAlchemy Python. So I'm just going to run it by clicking my little arrow here. And it picked up the art database over here, you can see, and you can see in my terminal the results of my query. You remember that if we, well, hopefully, if you've been keeping up, you've done this. If not, I'll remind you again, under extensions, there is an extension for SQLite that was written by this person, Alex CVZZ, and I've installed it. And that's how I usually view so I'm going to hit Control-Shift-P, and I can search, but I've used this recently, so it's at the top, my SQLite. And I'm going to open the art database, and then I'm going to show my Explorer, and here's my SQLite Explorer, and here are my two tables. And if I right-click and say show the table, I can see my painters. And if I right-click on paintings, I can see my paintings. Okay. So that's all review. We did this all before. The only difference so far is that I separated the populating from the defining and then brought the definition over to populate by an import. No big deal. Okay, good review maybe, but no big deal, nothing big. Now we're bringing in the routes and the form. Okay, so we did define, we did populate. Here are the routes. So now I'm in Flask, I'm making routes. I once again bring in my database and establish then that the form is going to connect to my Python, which is going to connect to my database. So I need a session maker again. So I bring in my definition, I set up my session maker. That is my SQLAlchemy stuff. Then I'm doing my Flask stuff. So here's my Flask stuff. I'm going over to something I call artist form arts, which is going to pick up my artist form. So let me go take a peek at artist form. Forms art should have something called artist form. So here I am in my page that makes a form. I have Flask form, I have a submit field, I have string fields, I have validators that I'm just doing length and that they're required. So pretty simple validation. I have the artist form that I promised. This is for inserting an artist. I'm going to have a last name. And I'm going to say that that's required and it has to be more than 2 letters and less than 60. I have that was the last name. I have a first name, which is similar. I have a country. I have a birth date and a death date. Again, I'm not using a date type because these are old dates from like the 1800s. And a normal date in programming doesn't support such old dates very well. And I have a submit field. So I'm going to ask the user to tell me a new artist, give me a last name, a first name, a country, and birth date and death date, and then click a button, and then I'm going to make that artist. Okay, so that's what the form is going to look like. I'm going to come back to routes, but there should be an artist form that allows me to enter the last name, the first name, the country, the birth date, and the death date, and then submit. So that's what corresponds to, so I code the form over in, I lost it now, forms_art. And then here is me in an HTML saying I want to use those things. And then I have a handler. And I'm just using the most basic handler that we did before of spitting the information back out. Here's what you enter. The result, the last name, the first name, the country, the birth date. But in between the form and the handler, I'm going to interact with the database and I'm going to insert. So that's back in route. So route's a little bit more than a route now. So here I am back in route. I have a default route, which I'm redirecting to the artist form. Here's artist form. Oops, I didn't want that. Here is my standard sort of thing. If it's valid, go to the handler. If it's not valid, go to the form. And in addition, here's my new stuff of inserting a painter. So if what I sent over was valid, then I'm creating my database, my_DB, that's what I imported, that has a painter class. And then I'm using its constructor and I'm making a last name, a first name. Last name is result last name. So I'm just gathering all my information, last name, first name, country, birth date, death date. I'm adding the painter and committing. And that is a database insert. Okay. So I usually run Flask this way by the command line. You guys, a lot of you do other things. You can do your other things so long as they work. If you come to me with things that don't work, I'm going to make you do it my way because this is what I understand. So I am in the command line saying $v : Flask_app equals, and this is pointing to my routes. And I'm entering my routes, and then it's Flask run. And then I'm control clicking to open the file. And here is a form for me to insert an artist. The nice thing about the separating the code is that I am not rerunning the populate code. So I'm rerunning the insert code. I'm rerunning my route, and that is some insert code, but I'm not rerunning the populate code. So I'm not putting the artist I have in the data file, I'm not putting them in over and over and over again. Putting in, this is presumably a new artist. Does anybody have an artist they want me to put in? No. All right. So there's from sometime before, Vincent van Gogh. So let's put in Vincent van Gogh or Van Gogh, if you're, I don't know. It's probably somewhat more correct. So I don't know. Let's say that he was born on February 2nd in 1836. I'm making stuff up. And then let's say he died on March 3rd, 78. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up. And it doesn't matter about the dates because they're just strings. I'm not really validating the date in sort of any way. And then I'm going to insert the artist. There's my handler saying I got the information from you, but between the form where the user entered the date and the handler, which just confirmed here was the date, here was all the information, we inserted the artist into the database. So if I go over here, right click on painters and say show the table, there's Van Gogh. Van Gogh wasn't there. So right now I have 6 artists. If I run through that again and choose a different artist, I will have 7 artists. I've saved the artist DB, so Van Gogh will stay in the table so long as I keep this file. If I delete this file and rerun my populate, Van Gogh will be gone. But for now, Van Gogh is there and in the database, and we've committed to having Van Gogh in our database. Any questions? I'm getting blank stares, or at least nobody has a question. Okay. So so now you have to do, what do you have to do for the lab? It showed you what you had to do for homework. I talked about the project. There's a lab, which is, of course, is pretty much just what I did, except a different, I didn't post a lab. Okay. Does that mean you don't have to do one? No, I'll post it. All right, so I got to find a lab. So I taught this course before. Where is it? I need to post this for you guys. I thought I did. All courses. 341 from the fall, there it is. Modules. Here is the lab, which I will download and then post up for you guys. We're doing basketball players. Isn't that fun? So you're going to put information into the table, and I give you one twist. Always make it harder on you than I make it on myself. You can pick what fields you want to put in there. You don't have to put in all the fields. But one of the fields I want you to have is the position. And I want you to not just have a blank regular old text input or a string field for that, but I want you to use a select field and make the choices center, forward, guard, or whatever the hell all these things are. I don't know anything about basketball, but so just to bring back in your Flask idea of a select field. So they can enter a name, first name, last name, the number, If you're going to use the number, you don't have to use the number, but if you're going to assign them a number, then you might say, oh, it's a number field. It has to be more than 0 and less than 100 or something. But you don't have to do that validation. The one bit of validation I'm expecting you to do is use a drop-down select to limit the positions to these. Okay. So that's what you guys have to do. Now let me make that file available to you. 341 modules. File. Lab 19. Get you guys out of my way. Add. There it is. Okay, so now you have access. Any questions? Stop recording.